Everybody knows about the castle. So we went over to the castle and actually borrowed a curator from Air and Space to come over and work on the American History military exhibit, and it worked out very well. And it was a twofer because he had his PhD in colonial history and the American Revolutionary War. So I used it for all kinds of things. The next interesting thing that happened, I pulled all the curators together at the National Museum of American History and said, now, I'm going to give you a week. I want everyone to go back to their individual collections and come back and tell me what would be applicable to this military exhibition. Does everybody understand? Everybody? They all went away. We reconvened them a week later, and I said, okay, so what'd y'all find? We don't have anything in our collection to do with military history. I said, are you sure? And there's such a prejudice there for military history that that's the way to look at it. Unless it was a gun or a bomb or dog tags or rations, then it wasn't applicable. Well, certainly we found things in a lot of different collections that we used in the exhibit, and it was just a strange way of doing things. And then I guess the last thing that's interesting about the Smithsonian is that every museum there, whether it's American history or Air and Space, has a Congress of Scholars. And the Congress of Scholars' job is to keep you on the straight and narrow of academic purity. So when we were showing them the plans of our military exhibit, I was taking the tasks that were not very much about World War I. Why was I not emphasizing World War I? I had explained to them, well, we don't have any really good collections for World War I. And they explained to me that that didn't matter. And so beware of the Congress of Scholars. I had the great pleasure of working at Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, one of the places I had wanted to work at since I was a small child, ever since my third grade class visit. And so to have an opportunity to work at that great institution was a real joy. Colonial Williamsburg, like a lot of older institutions, are trying to find ways to reinvent themselves. And that's certainly what we found at Colonial Williamsburg when I first came on board. I was responsible for a lot of their programming there. I never will forget one of the first meetings I attended. We were all sitting around and we were talking about the new audiences we're going to have to deal with. Everybody was concerned that this new audience of these 40 and 50-year-olds, what were they going to come and see, and what could we tell them, and how we could reinterpret history to these guys that are 50 years old, and they're professionals. And I'm sitting and I'm looking at the room, I'm looking at the panel, and I'm going, well, aren't we that audience? Aren't we the 40? Because everybody in there was at least 50 years old. And there was this pause. Well, yes. What would y'all like to see at the So that was kind of a strange introduction to work at the Colonial. But we were able to create some programs. We were able to kind of reinvent living history, and we certainly did that with the outdoor programming that we had called Revolutionary City, and that's something we're very proud of. But the thing that was most important about Revolutionary City and launching it as a reinterpretation of how we did things at Colonial Williamsburg, and also the fact that it really did bring people back to the foundation, was that it was one of the first times that the foundation as a whole came together to work on a project. And that meant everybody. That meant development people. That meant the curators. That meant the historians. That meant retail sales. That meant the guys over at the golf course. That meant hotel properties. Everybody came to the table. Everybody wanted to contribute. Everybody had a good idea of how to make that program better. And it became a very successful program. Does Colonial Williamsburg still have some challenges today? Certainly, but most of the institutions do. The rules I want to tell you about transition are pretty straightforward. The first rule is always be self-assured. Now, that doesn't mean to be a show-off. That doesn't mean to be a know-it-all, because nobody likes those kind of people. But be self-assured internally. If you're self-assured, then that will reflect the people who are around you. If you know and feel that you know the process in which you want to take things and how to get it done, then that's going to reflect, and I think people will be able to see that within you. The second thing is what I call the who, what, when, how, and where of transitioning into different places. The who is when you come to a new institution, talk to everybody. Interview everybody. Interview your colleague, interview people you might be supervising, interview your boss. They may have a vision that was not explained to you during the interviewing process. So find out what they're all about. Also identify for yourselves the movers and shakers. Now that doesn't mean the people that are in charge, because oftentimes the people that are in charge are not the movers and shakers. But find out who the movers and shakers are, find out how they've been able to accomplish what they've been able to do with the institution, and hook your horse to that wagon. So I think they will help you show the way and help you move your projects forward. The what. So we've talked about the who, the what. Well, when you go to an institution, whether it's during the interview process or just because you desperately need a job and this is the only one that's offering you one, or whatever your purpose of going to that institution is, what do you want to accomplish there? What do you want to achieve? If you go to Museum X, what is your vision for Museum X? We've all been there. We all know we can do a better job than our bosses. We all know that we can do a better job of the institution that's across the street because we're so much smarter than those that are running those things. But know internally what you want to do. And I had a good friend who was a colleague. I often had to, in a situation where I was supervising, he used to come and see me about twice a year. And he'd ask me how things are going. And I said, well, you know, things are going pretty well. I said, I'm having trouble with this, I'm having trouble with this. So, well, what do you want to achieve? And as long as he reminded me of that question at least twice a year, that kept me on pretty much a course to achieve the goals that I wanted to. So the who, the what, the when. How quickly you want to get things done. I've never have understood that you have 3 years to get an exhibit done, that 12 hours before the end of those 3 years, you'll get it done. If you have 12 months to get it done, 12 hours before that. The truth of the matter is you can make a project as long as you want it to be or as short as you want it to be. And at the Smithsonian, they were famous for the castle to come over and say, can you throw a presents exhibit up in 12 months? Yeah. And then 12 hours before that. So having your own mind, how quickly you want to get something done, how deliberately you want to get something done. And the thing to remember is that you always will have people that are going to drag their feet and tell you that you can't do something, and those are the ones that you say, well, sure we can. So the who, what, the when, the how. Now, I'm not talking about the how of the nuts and bolts. I'm not talking about the hows of logistics of putting programs together and exhibits together. What I'm talking about is how you're going to get people involved and sold on your project. And you need to talk to your colleagues, you need to talk to your teammates, you need to convince your director that this is going to be the coolest thing at your museum that has ever happened before. So have an idea of what you want to do, how you want to get it done, and you'll find that it's going to be pretty smooth sailing as you proceed along that project. You have to sell yourself. Never go to somebody and say, I think it'd be a really good idea if we had an exhibit on swings that Robert E. Lee used at Washington and Lee. Now, on the surface, that might not be a good idea, but if you have already planned and know how to sell that, and you've already got your ducks lined up in a row of people who agree with you that's a good exhibit, then half your work is done. And then I guess the last thing I'll tell you is, where do you want to be, once you take on a new job, where do you want to be in a year? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Is this going to be your last job? You know that's probably not the case. There's always room for you in Bedford. But always plan your career what the next step's going to be. Always be looking on, if I wasn't working here today, where would I want to go next? Because that's the important thing. And the last thing I'll tell you, I'll leave you with this, always take your rubber pills, never burn a bridge, and never take yourself too seriously. Thank you very much. All that on a 3x5.
You said you weren't going to write anything.
Oh, I know, but you scared me.
Scott, we've had an extra 45 minutes. Is your presentation ready?
Oh, well,
batting cleanup, and thus ending my tortured sports analogy, is Scott Harris. So Scott is the director of the James Monroe Museum and Memorial Library. He's the former director of the Newmarket Battlefield State Historical Park, the former director of Historic Resources for the City of Manassas, the former curator of the Manassas Museum, and a former consulting historian with APVA. Scott is a former president of the Virginia Association of Museums and a graduate of the Seminar for Historical Administration. Scott?
Well, Mike, thank you. I was taking notes while everybody else spoke because I really hadn't prepared anything at all, so I'm just going to repeat. And actually, there's a funny story in it. We didn't compare notes at all before. We traded a bunch of very funny emails about this, mostly protesting how we really had no idea what we were going to say. And from the moment Tracy started talking, I was really dumbfounded at how much first she and then Doug and then Robin were hitting many of the same elements that I had put together in what I'm going to tell you. So much so that as I go along here, I can check them off, you know, one after the other, and as you would have to say, I think you'll see it too. So that says something, I think, good about what we have done in our careers, what we've encountered, and hopefully what we've drawn from it, and maybe says something about how applicable it could be to y'all. Because all we are really doing in this is telling stories, and hopefully by some example, giving a little sense of how we confronted our career evolutions, and maybe give y'all some guidance. So here it is, and the dirty secret I have for the rest of the panel is that I did in fact prepare remarks ahead of time.
No. We were frightened of that.
I know. Yeah. Timing is everything. I came of age at the point where historic preservation and museum studies were becoming degree programs. At Mary Washington College, I was in the first class to go through a full 4 years of an undergraduate program in historic preservation. In one of my classes, there was this older guy named Doug Harvey. The rumor was he flunked out of community college, but somehow he got into Mary Washington. Yeah.
The band broke up.
Yeah, the band broke up. You forgot that there's a real estate agent in there too, and all the things that you did. It was not the last time our paths would cross. Oh, and I should say here, I was going to talk a little bit about part of my career, but I should mention that since everyone else was talking about all the jobs they had tacked on, I sold World Book Encyclopedia and I flagged traffic at a tractor pull. But after I graduated in 1983, I did take a detour into a little bit of a different world. I went to work for a defense contractor in the Hampton Roads area, actually, before going back to where we all know the real money is, museums. I went through William and Mary's master's program in history that had a concentration in museum administration, where I met Martha, and where I met Connie, and Lou, and a bunch of other people here. And that program was in conjunction with Colonial Williamsburg. And it was a fabulous program. I and a number of other people who had the good fortune to go through it learned a tremendous amount. It was sadly later a victim of budget cuts and no longer exists. But it gave me the chance to take a generalist approach to museum work. I went to school, I did costume interpretation, I interned with curators, with educators, with development staff, and I already knew at that point that I wanted to be a museum director when I grew up. But I wanted to have as much of an appreciation and a grounding in all aspects of museum work as I possibly could, to be as well-rounded, I guess, or whatever, as it could be. And part of that process became the ability to attend professional conferences first as a student and later as an employee. They taught me the value of networking, as has already been mentioned here. At SEMC in 1988, Alvin Gerhardt, a VAM founder who you may have noticed just passed away within the last week or so, told me that the reality of museum work is that the director is usually the one who has to unclog the toilet. I think we heard a reference to toilet unclogging already here too. That bit of wisdom would be proved